There have always been souls born not to please the world, but to awaken it. Aries is one of those souls. People often call them strange, but the truth is, they simply live on a different wavelength, a place where instinct, light, and courage meet to create life itself. Aries steps into this world like the very first spark of the universe, a being carrying the mission to open the way. They were never born to blend in. They were born to ignite. While most people learn to control, Aries learns to burn. They are not afraid of mistakes nor of being misunderstood, because their soul knows what is pure is often called different. I still remember the first time I looked at the birth chart of an Aries. There was something in that energy that made me fall silent. It felt like witnessing the very first sunrise of consciousness, brilliant, untamed, undefined. In the stillness of meditation, I understood. Aries' strangeness is not a flaw. It is the language of the universe expressed through human form, where every action becomes a prayer and instinct itself becomes faith. Elsewhere, people are taught how to live properly, how to speak so they will be liked. But Aries, they don't know how to pretend. They love honestly, they rage honestly, they grieve honestly. They carry the energy of beginnings, a force that cannot be contained, only revealed. And when the world looks at them, few realize that to live that truthfully requires a rare kind of courage. In today's world where people fear being different and judged, Aries becomes a mirror reflecting this truth. We don't need to be perfect to be loved. We just need to be honest with ourselves. And perhaps the most unusual thing about them is not the way they live, but the fact that they dare to live truthfully, even if it means walking alone, even if the world turns away. So if someone ever calls you too much, too strong, or too different, pause and smile. Maybe you're just speaking the same language as the universe, the language of truth, because sometimes the very souls that confuse the world are the ones carrying the light humanity has forgotten. Aries teaches us a simple but profound lesson. Never rush to judge what you do not understand, because within every difference, there is always a seed of light waiting to be seen. Let your heart be the place where compassion begins, for only when we stop judging can we truly see the sacred beauty in others and in ourselves. And then, when we begin to understand, we start to see more clearly that behind that fiery, impulsive blaze, Aries holds something exquisitely tender, the heart of a child. A heart that is strong yet innocent, brave yet breakable, and always moved by what is pure. And that is where the story begins to unfold. In a world where people learn to hide their emotions behind polite smiles, Aries arrives like a gust of wind blowing the other way, honest, fiery, and utterly pure. They don't hide their hearts, even when they know it makes them vulnerable. Aries loves like a child seeing a rainbow for the first time with wonder, innocence, and no fear of the storm. They speak what they feel, act from the rhythm of their heart, not to prove anything, but because they don't know any other way to live truthfully. To others, that honesty might seem reckless, even naive. But within that so-called innocence lies a kind of courage few are strong enough to possess. The courage to live without armor. Aries doesn't need a mask to survive in a doubtful world. They believe that if the heart is pure enough, it will always find the right way, even when that way is rough, uneven, and lined with scars. I once met an Aries whose eyes shone like fire yet were as clear as water. She told me that her whole life she had been misunderstood. People said she was too real, too direct, too fast, too much. But amid all the criticism, she chose to stay true to herself. "If I have to pretend to be loved," she said softly, "then that love was never real." In that moment, I understood Aries' innocence isn't weakness. It's the quality of a soul that refuses to stop believing in goodness. The world can make us numb, but Aries reminds us that not everyone loses their original light. They walk through pain not to become harder, but to learn how to keep their hearts tender. That's their strange kind of strength. When they are angry, it's the storm of truth. When they forgive, it's the sunlight of compassion. Within them, the warrior and the child coexist. One fights for ideals, the other loves by instinct. And perhaps that's why so many people can't quite understand Aries. How can someone burn so fiercely and yet remain so clear? How can they fight with such intensity, then smile with such gentleness right after? But if you look closer, you'll see. Their innocence is the flame that softens every battlefield inside their soul. Today's world needs more people like that. Those who dare to trust, to love, and to speak from the heart. Because only the hearts that are real can awaken the humanity sleeping in all of us. They may be misunderstood, they may get hurt, but they remind us that sincerity has never gone out of style. So if you've ever been told you're too real, too strong, or too different, ask yourself, maybe you too carry a spark the world just hasn't learned to understand yet. Maybe that difference isn't a flaw but a torch meant to guide lost souls home. And then, when that light inside you begins to move, you'll feel something extraordinary. That innocence, when it meets life's chaos, doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes a new kind of energy, wild, vibrant, unstoppable. An energy so bright that even the darkness must step back. That's the moment when the child of light becomes the artist of the storm, the one who turns chaos into the art of living. There are people who, when the world around them falls apart, do not run or seek shelter. They stand still, right in the heart of the storm, listening to the sound of the wind, the thunder, the pulse of life spinning all around them. Aries are those people. When others tremble before chaos, Aries sees in it an opportunity, a door opening toward creation and transformation. They don't seek perfection because they understand that order is only a temporary illusion. Life isn't made of straight lines, it's made of curves, of sudden turns, of falls and cracks. And it's through those cracks that the light gets in. And that's where Aries begins to dance. They are not afraid of the wind, because that same wind is what makes their fire rise higher. I once met an Aries at a time when they had lost everything, their job, their love, their faith. When I asked if they were afraid, they smiled, eyes full of pain yet shining with life. Of course I'm afraid, they said, but if I don't let everything fall apart, how will I ever know I'm strong enough to rebuild? In that answer, I heard the echo of the Aries soul, a soul born not to seek comfort, but to discover the strength of rebirth. Aries lives like a flame in the middle of a storm, never extinguished, only changing its shape, its color, its intensity. They act, they fall, they rise again, as if mistakes were just part of the art of living. The world may call it impulsive, but to them, it's creation itself. Aries doesn't wait for clear skies to start painting. They paint right through the rain. And perhaps that's why their canvas feels more alive than anyone else's. Sometimes, they even fall into the chaos they themselves created. But instead of breaking down, they listen. They know that every storm carries a message. It's time to change. Aries doesn't avoid that message. They let the wind tear away the old so they can touch what's real again. To others, it may look like recklessness, but to Aries, it's a journey back to the soul. I've come to believe that chaos doesn't come to punish us. It comes to remind us that we are still alive. When everything is turned upside down, when the plan collapses, when we have nothing left to hold on to, that's when life truly begins. Aries understands this better than anyone, because they were not made to survive within order. They were born from the chaos of the universe itself. Chaos doesn't destroy Aries, it defines them. For in every storm they find themselves, and in every moment of losing control they rediscover freedom. If you're walking through chaos right now, don't rush to pray for calm. Instead, ask yourself, what light is trying to be born within me? Because maybe, just like Aries, you're being taught by the universe how to dance inside the storm. And when the wind finally quiets, when the breath of life begins to steady once more, Aries discovers a quiet gift hidden inside the chaos, a gift called courage. A kind of courage that doesn't come from winning, but from daring to live fully in what cannot be predicted. And from there, the journey of that flame begins again, a new chapter, where courage becomes the heartbeat guiding everything yet to come. There are people born to walk paths already paved, and there are those born to take the very first step on a road that has never existed before. Aries are those people. They don't wait for life's green light, nor the applause of the crowd. They follow another call, a faint but powerful whisper rising from deep within the soul that says, "Go, even if you don't yet know what lies ahead." Aries walks as if the universe were holding their hand, even when that hand is invisible. While many need a map, they only need faith. They jump not out of recklessness, but because they believe that if they dare to leap, their wings will appear. And strangely enough, most of the time they do. Because the universe always seems to make space for souls who dare to believe before they see, to love before they are loved, and to act before they are certain. I once met an Aries standing at a crossroads between a stable career and an impossible dream. They chose the dream. When I asked why, they smiled and said, "I'd rather fail being myself than succeed living like someone else." That sentence has haunted me for years, because in a world that measures worth by safety, Aries measures it by experience. They don't fear risk, they fear mediocrity. Their courage isn't loud, it burns quietly inside the heart. When they love as if they've never been hurt. When they fail, they lift their chin and smile. Aries knows that every scar has its own soul, a story of the time they lived fully, believed completely, and burned for something worthy. They would rather wear scars than regrets. Because for Aries, regret is the slowest form of death, the death of spirit, passion, and faith. The world often doesn't understand this kind of bravery. People call them reckless, impulsive, even foolish. But sometimes foolishness is a sacred kind of wisdom. In Buddhist teaching, those who dare to walk without seeing the path are said to have the deepest faith. Faith is not blindness, it's trust that every step is already guided by the divine. Aries is the living embodiment of that trust. And if you're hearing this right now, maybe a spark like that also lives within you. Maybe you too are standing between safety and a dream. Remember, the universe does not reward hesitation, it rewards movement. Life doesn't wait for readiness, it waits for courage. Sometimes one single leap can change everything. You might fall, you might break, but you'll know the feeling of someone who has truly lived. And in that moment, you'll understand why Aries never fears the fall, because every fall is a doorway back to the self. So if something inside your heart trembles, don't silence it. Let it lead you. Let faith take you where logic cannot. And in the open air of uncertainty, you'll discover a truth few dare to face. That courage isn't just action. It's living in complete honesty with your soul. And from that courage, something deeper begins to awaken. A raw, unfiltered truth, one so powerful, most people are afraid to speak it aloud. In a world where people are taught to say what's easy to hear rather than what's true, Aries chooses the hardest path. They speak the truth. Not because they want to prove a point, but because they cannot live in the shadow of pretense. To Aries, silence in the face of truth is a quiet form of betrayal, a betrayal of one's own conscience. When Aries speaks, their words can burn like fire, yet within that fire lies the purity of a soul that does not know how to pretend. They don't hide emotions behind masks, nor do they sugarcoat the truth to make it easier for others to digest. Because they believe that truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to freedom. To Aries, no one can truly love unless they have faced the truth within themselves. I once witnessed an Aries in a moment where they had to say something no one wanted to hear. It was a winter evening. The soft yellow light touched their face, their eyes filled with hesitation. And yet they spoke. Their voice trembled in the silence of the room. Something broke after those words, yet strangely within the breaking, something else was reborn. Honesty, respect, and a new kind of trust. Where others choose silence to keep the peace, Aries chooses truth to keep their soul alive. Their truth doesn't come from logic, it comes from intuition. They can feel when something isn't right, when a room feels heavy with unspoken words, when someone's eyes carry what their lips won't admit. And instead of turning away, Aries lights a flame, not to burn, but to illuminate. Many fear that light because it reveals what has been hidden. But Aries knows no one heals in the dark. There is a saying in Buddhist teaching, truth is the lamp that guides you even if it blinds your eyes. Aries is that lamp, not soft, not perfect, but always honest. They dare to speak what others avoid, to face their own emotions rather than bury them. To Aries, honesty isn't just morality, it's how they keep their spirit pure in a world built on deception. Of course, their truth isn't always easy to hear. Sometimes their words cut deep, and people call them cold or unfeeling. But deep down, they never mean to hurt. They simply believe that a real wound heals faster than a false comfort. A lie, no matter how kind, poisons slowly. Aries understands that truth must walk hand in hand with compassion, and life teaches them this, one heartbreak at a time. Aries doesn't burn with truth, they heal with fire. Because fire doesn't only destroy, it purifies. And every time they speak what must be said, something heavy lifts from the air and a small light flickers to life. They know that some people may walk away, but whatever stays will be real. If you've ever spoken a truth that changed everything, you know that feeling. Aries lives with a strange mix of loss and relief, fear and freedom. Because truth is never the end. It's the beginning of something more honest, more alive. And maybe that's why the world doesn't always know what to do with them. People see the flame but forget the warmth. They hear the words but not the trembling behind them. Because beneath that armor of a warrior lies a tender, sensitive heart, one that still longs to be seen, to be loved, to be forgiven. And that is where the story leads us next. Beyond the fire, into the soul that feels, that fears, but still chooses to love with everything it has left. There are people who walk through our lives with proud eyes and a smile that never fades, and we think they are unbreakable. But if we could look deeper, we'd see within that flame a quiet loneliness, like a candle burning bright in the dark, both radiant and aching. Aries is like that. Beneath the armor of strength lies a heart so tender, even they sometimes fear to touch it. They appear as leaders, trailblazers, warriors untouched by fear. But few realize what Aries hides behind each bold step. They fear being left behind, fear that their love won't be enough, fear that their kindness will be misunderstood. And because they fear, they fight, not to prove their power, but to protect what they are afraid to lose. A person, a dream, or simply the feeling of being seen, being understood. I once met an Aries woman, successful, confident, her voice steady as steel. But when I asked, "What scares you most?" her eyes softened. "I'm afraid that when I'm weak, no one will stay." That answer silenced me, because it revealed a truth so simple yet so profound. The strongest people aren't those who never hurt, they are the ones who have been hurt so deeply they've learned to hide it well. Aries is a soul that lives through emotion. They feel everything more deeply, more fiercely, and yes, more painfully. When they love, they give all. When they're disappointed, they collapse in silence. They don't know how to love halfway, nor how to walk away gracefully. They love as if the world ends today. And because they love so honestly, they break just as deeply. That pain doesn't disappear, it hides behind pride, behind laughter, behind that unshakable confidence the world admires. Compassion, something often mistaken for weakness, is instinctive for Aries. They forgive faster, they trust easier, even when it means risking betrayal. In their light and in their shadow, they teach us this. Kindness doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. If you ever see an Aries angry, don't be afraid. Look closer. Behind that fire may be a wound that hasn't yet been understood. They don't crave conflict, they're just protecting the softest part of themselves, their heart. And when they're loved with patience, when someone dares to look past their armor, Aries melts. They return to their true essence, gentle, warm, and full of light. Perhaps that's what makes them so different. Strength doesn't cancel out vulnerability, they coexist, side by side, shaping the strange beauty of a soul that is both warrior and child. And maybe we all carry a little bit of Aries within us, the part that pretends to be fine while quietly longing for one comforting embrace. If you've ever hidden your softness just to be called strong, maybe this time let yourself be real. Let the tears speak, let the pain be seen, let your heart breathe. Because sometimes, only when we dare to be soft, do we finally become truly strong. And it's exactly because they feel life so deeply that Aries can never stay still. They carry within them a sacred restlessness, the holy unease of a soul that's still evolving, forever searching for something greater, something that makes them feel truly, completely alive. There are souls who simply cannot sit still in this life. When the world chooses to stand still, they hear a faint call echoing from deep within, a call of life, of movement, of constant transformation. Aries is one of those souls. Inside them flows a river of fire, always moving, always pushing forward, always seeking something beyond the horizon. They cannot bear stagnation. They reject repetition, because the Aries soul wasn't born for stillness. It was born to experience, to explore, to stretch beyond its own limits. They carry within them the instinct of evolution, a fierce desire to live every moment fully, as if tomorrow might never come. I once met an Aries who had changed homes, jobs, and even entire life paths so often that people around her began to worry. When I asked, "Why can't you just stay still for a while?" she smiled, a smile bright yet touched with sorrow. "Because when I stop," she said softly, "I feel like I'm dying inside." Her words struck me deeply. I realized then that for Aries, movement isn't recklessness, it's survival. It's how they keep their soul alive. Aries isn't running away, they're moving in rhythm with the universe. They understand impermanence, the anicca that Buddhism speaks of, not through theory but through living. Each sunrise is a new chance, each encounter a lesson, each loss a beginning disguised as an ending. They live in the pulse of life and death, of coming and going, of blooming and fading, and within that cycle they find the truest meaning of existence. The world sometimes calls them impatient, restless, unable to settle. But what others see as instability is, for Aries, the soul's way of saying, "I am still alive." Their restlessness isn't ego, it's the echo of a spirit reaching toward the light. When their heart calls, they cannot ignore it. When the universe whispers their name, they cannot wait. They step forward, often without knowing where the road leads, trusting that every step has a purpose. While others wait for a sign to begin, Aries is the sign. They don't wait for peace to act, they act to find peace. Their life is an endless journey of small rebirths, shifting thoughts, shedding old habits, walking through fear and starting anew. It's this movement, this constant renewal, that keeps them young, radiant, and alive with an undefinable glow from within. If you've been feeling a pull toward change, perhaps your soul is awakening too. Don't silence that call with fear. Sometimes it's not anxiety, it's the universe reminding you that you're ready for your next chapter. And like Aries, you don't need to see the whole path before taking your first step. Trust that every movement has meaning. Every change is an invitation to come closer to who you truly are. Because only when we dare to step beyond comfort can we touch the deepest part of our soul, the place where real life begins. And when greater challenges arrive, when the winds of life begin to roar, Aries will once again astonish the world. For in the very heart of the storm, they reveal their greatest gift, the infinite power of rebirth, the sacred fire that never dies. No one can truly see the entire path an Aries has walked. They move between light and shadow, between faith and despair, as if performing a sacred ritual that only their soul understands. Because within every Aries there sleeps a phoenix, and only when life burns them through loss does that fire rise, not for vengeance but for rebirth. When the world sees them fall, Aries is already preparing for a return. They don't beg for pity. They don't blame fate. They sit quietly in the ashes of themselves, eyes still bright, heart still beating, and somewhere deep inside, soul begins to stir. Where others see endings, Aries sees beginnings. They believe that falling is not failure, stopping is. And so they rise, even when there's nothing left to hold onto but breath itself. I once knew an Aries who lost everything: career, love, even faith. For months they disappeared, silent, as if erased from the world. Then one morning I received news they had started again. A new idea, a new life. When I asked why, they smiled gently. "I couldn't let the fire inside me go out," they said. "If it goes out, I disappear too." And in that moment I understood, for Aries, rebirth isn't a choice, it's their nature. There's a rare beauty in the way they return. No bitterness, no pride, just a quiet strength radiating from within. Like a phoenix, they burn in the fire, rise in the light, and wear their scars like medals. Each crack in them is a doorway for light to enter, for wisdom to emerge. They don't hide their wounds because they know those wounds are proof they've truly lived, truly loved, truly dared. In Buddhist teaching, it is said, "From suffering, wisdom is born." Aries embodies that truth. They don't run from pain, they transform it into fuel. Pain doesn't make them hard, it makes them kind. They see others with compassion because they themselves have been broken. I believe that every fall is a lesson from the soul to expand its capacity to love. And Aries is the soul that learns that lesson best. When you see an Aries smile after the storm, don't think they've forgotten the pain. They've simply learned how to turn pain into light. And that is a kind of miracle only those who have shattered can understand. Aries is living proof that even destruction can be sacred, that beauty can grow out of ashes. If you've ever fallen to your lowest point and thought you couldn't rise again, remember them, the souls who know how to reignite themselves. Tell me, how did you rise from your own ashes? Because sometimes your story could be the light that guides someone else out of the dark. And then after every rebirth, the flame of Aries grows brighter, deeper, holier. That light no longer belongs only to them. It merges with the breath of the universe itself, connecting their soul to something greater than human form, a divine current, unseen yet alive in every heartbeat they take. Not everyone understands the fire of Aries. People see the impulsiveness, the intensity, but few ever glimpse the sacred force within, a fire that isn't just energy, but the very soul of life itself flowing through them. Every breath, every decision, every action an Aries takes carries the heartbeat of the universe, as if God himself were experiencing creation through their eyes and hands. Aries doesn't need rituals or prayers to touch the divine. They don't need to kneel in silence, because their actions are living prayers. When they dare to step into the unknown, when they love fully knowing they might be hurt, when they create something that has never existed before, that is their meditation. Not through stillness, but through movement. Not through words, but through life itself. I once met an Aries who had lost all direction, but instead of begging for a miracle, they became the miracle. They began to paint, to write, to cook, to help others. Every small act was like a thread, slowly mending a torn soul. When I asked, "What made you rise again?" they smiled and said, "Because I know the universe never left me, it's just been teaching me to listen more closely to my own voice." For Aries, intuition is the compass of the soul. When they follow it, the universe breathes with them. When they act from that pure place within their heart, they become a bridge between the human and the divine. Everything they do, a step, a smile, a glance, carries an invisible message. I am here to live, to love, to shine. Their fire isn't meant to burn, it's meant to illuminate. It shines into the corners where others hide their fear, dissolves the fog of doubt, and awakens forgotten memories of faith. Perhaps that's why, when an Aries walks into a room, the energy shifts, not because they try, but because they are. In Buddhist teaching, it is said, when one lives in alignment with their true nature, they are serving the universe. Aries is living proof of that. They make no separation between spirituality and life, because for them, to live authentically is prayer, to love sincerely is ceremony, and to create boldly is devotion. Every act becomes a bridge between heaven and earth, between soul and body. If you've been feeling a force rising within, a quiet call to change, to create, to believe in something greater, trust it. It's not an illusion. It's the sacred fire awakening in you, inviting you to join the dance of life, to move in rhythm with the universe. Write in the comments, "I trust the sacred fire within me." Because the moment you acknowledge that light, you allow the miracle to begin. And from that divine flame, Aries shines like a torch among humanity, not just lighting their own path, but igniting the hearts of those lost in darkness. For their greatest gift is not in being the light, but in awakening it within others until the whole world glows with the brilliance of love and awakening. Not every fire is born to burn. Some fires are born to illuminate. And Aries is one of those sacred flames, the kind that pushes back the darkness and makes people believe again in the goodness within themselves. They don't burn just for their own light. They burn so others remember that they, too, once carried such a flame before time covered it in dust, before fear dimmed it, before doubt made them forget. Aries doesn't try to inspire, they simply exist, and that's enough. Their presence is a quiet reminder. Live honestly, take the leap, have faith again. When they walk into a room, their energy moves like warm air, subtle yet undeniable. When they speak, their words reach deep, not because they are eloquent, but because they are real. And when they love in a way that makes you want to become the best version of yourself. I once met an Aries who changed the lives of a small group of people who had lost their way. Not through teaching, not through preaching, just by living. They worked with tireless passion, fell and rose again, and kept believing in goodness even after witnessing so much pain. And then something beautiful happened. One person found the courage to chase a forgotten dream. Another learned to forgive. Someone else began to believe they were worthy of love. All because they saw the light in Aries and realized that same light lived within them too. When one soul lives authentically, thousands of others awaken. Aries is the frequency of awakening. They touch hearts not through logic, but through resonance. They remind us that every soul carries a spark of the universe, and sometimes all it takes is one flame to set another alight. And then we realize the world doesn't always need another hero. It needs a soul brave enough to be real. In my journey as a healer, I've come to believe that each of us carries a sacred fire, and Aries is the activator within us all. They don't give us strength, they remind us that we already have it. They don't save us, they simply shine so we can see the path ourselves. And in a world so filled with fear and doubt, that kind of light is rare and holy. The presence of Aries is a spark, their courage a mirror, their love a fire that spreads. They remind us that kindness still exists, that faith is not lost, and that life, even in its chaos, is still something sacred. If you've ever been inspired by an Aries, a friend, a lover, a co-worker, or even a passing soul, take a moment. Write their name. Thank them. Because in that moment they helped you remember you're still alive. Thank you, beautiful soul, for listening. Thank you for taking the time to understand Aries and maybe to understand yourself. Perhaps in their light, you've just seen a reflection of your own sleeping flame. May that flame never go out, no matter how many times the world tries to dim it. Live boldly, love deeply, shine endlessly as Aries does. Because every time a single flame rises, the universe smiles.